Lieutenant Grant Mercer had always been lucky with crash landings. The kind of luck that got him thrown 20 meters from the cockpit but still kept his spine in one piece. This time, his left arm hadn't been so fortunate. The shuttle lay in a smoldering heap a few clicks behind him, its beacon clicking faintly with an urgency no one in this star-forsaken sector was likely to care about. Blood soaked his side, seeping from the shredded remains of his arm, a latticework of torn tissue and snapped tendons held together by muscle memory and stubbornness. It hadn't moved in hours, which was just as well. The infection was already spidering its way up his shoulder, a nauseating warmth spreading faster than he liked. He stumbled into town sometime near dusk, if one could call a ring of low-slung blue sandstone huts around a central tower a town. The sky glowed lilac overhead, 2 moons peeking down as if to say, "Good luck, buddy." Locals bipedal, ash-skinned, tall enough to make him crane his neck when upright looked on with a mix of curiosity and mild revulsion. A trio of them ushered him into a squat building marked with a red crescent and some unfamiliar glyphs. One, dressed in robes that looked too pristine for this dusty outpost, took his vitals with long, suction-tipped fingers. Grant flinched when they touched the edge of his wound. "Necrosis already," the alien murmured. "Sareth, prep for detachment." Grant's ears perked up. "Detachment? You mean amputation?" The lead medic, Sareth, apparently tilted its head in an almost gentle motion. "It must be removed. The infection has passed first containment. We must sever before systemic failure begins." "Yeah, you might want to hold up on that," Grant said, wobbling to his feet. "Just give me a second." "You are barely oxygenating. Remain prone." "I'll manage," Grant muttered, one hand pressed against the table for support. "Look, before you go slicing and dicing, you should know who you're dealing with." Sareth blinked in a series of rapid pulses. "You are Grant Mercer. Human male, crashed vessel, severe trauma to extremity." Grant smiled weakly. "Sure, but also Dr. Grant Mercer, trauma and reconstructive specialist, level 9 certification in modular amputation and prosthetic neurofusion. I helped write the EarthGov protocols for high-grade limb trauma, for crying out loud." Sareth paused. "You are a surgeon?" "The best," Grant said, his vision swimming slightly. "On my world, at least. And if you'll let me, I'd like to amputate my own arm." There was a silence thick enough to drown in. "You are infected, weak, delirious. Which is why we shouldn't waste time with arguments," Grant grunted. "You don't know the regrowth junctions. If you cut where you're planning, it'll make regeneration almost impossible. But if I do it strategic detachment at the radial merge, then with some scaffold therapy back home, it's fully restorable." Sareth looked to the others. "This is not protocol." "No," Grant said. "This is medicine. Your anesthetics don't work on humans, do they?" Another pause. "Didn't think so. I read your notes when I stumbled in. Compound Q11 is enzymatic. Human neuroreceptors won't bind. You were about to saw my arm off while I'm awake." Sareth hesitated. "We assumed your species had high pain thresholds." Grant gave a hollow chuckle. "Some do. I don't. But I've done field surgery under worse." One of the assistants, a smaller figure with slate-gray skin and bright green eyes, stepped forward cautiously. "If we assist with sterilization and monitoring, you believe you can execute the detachment successfully?" "If I can stay conscious long enough," Grant said. "All I need is clean instruments, a tourniquet, and something sharp that vibrates at 40,000 RPM. You're proposing precision field bone separation?" "Modular detachment, version 4.1. Sareth leaned closer. "You are not stable." "Not yet. But if we wait, you'll have a dead patient and a biohazard. Let me do this." 10 minutes later, Grant was laid out on a flat surgical slab, conscious and trembling. His shredded arm lay beside him, still loosely connected by strands of muscle and fraying nerves. The alien instruments had been hastily modified filters added, rotation speeds tweaked to avoid tissue scorching. A repurposed diagnostic probe pulsed at his shoulder, tracking vitals with a high-pitched whine. Grant reached for the device with his good hand. "Bone saw?" The assistant handed it over. "Modified to 42,000 RPM. We calibrated for dense calcium-based skeletal material." "Perfect," Grant muttered. "Tourniquet tight?" "As you directed." Grant took a long breath. then jammed the saw into the base of his ruined bicep. The room lit up with a spray of red and a roar that echoed off the stone walls. Grant screamed a hoarse, unfiltered sound that made two of the aliens wince. The saw whined louder, biting through half-dead tissue, then into bone. He was precise, even through the pain, tracking landmarks only he understood. The smell of burning blood mixed with something metallic. He didn't realize he was crying until his one good eye blurred. Then everything tilted. The saw clattered from his hand. The room twisted into a kaleidoscope. He collapsed sideways, too weak to even curse. Sareth rushed forward but froze. The assistant, the slate-gray one, stepped in. "I'll finish it," it said softly. "You are unlicensed," Sareth hissed. "I studied Terran regenerative medicine, in underground files. I know where he was going with the cut. Let me help." Sareth hesitated. Grant, half-conscious, managed a weak groan. The assistant picked up the saw. In 20 seconds, it completed the separation with surgical precision. Blood flow stopped. Sealant foam hissed as it filled the stump. Monitors whined approvingly. The assistant looked to Sareth. "Clean interface, muscle sheath preserved, he'll regrow." Grant blinked up at the alien, barely seeing. He raised his good hand. With a bloody, quivering thumb, he gave a shaky thumbs up. Grant woke to the gentle hum of an air circulator and the distinctly unpleasant sensation of a needle inside his neck. His vision drifted in and out, the ceiling above him glowing a faint blue, patterned with flowing script that he couldn't quite read. He tried to move, winced, then thought better of it. His left side felt off. Not painful yet, but disconnected, like the limb had simply been deleted from his sense of self. He glanced down and confirmed the obvious. The arm was gone. Neatly sealed, actually. Wrapped in a breathable pale gray fabric that pulsed faintly, probably some sort of bioreactive gauze. Vitals stable. Cortical activity approaching pre-trauma baseline. The voice came from just outside his field of view. Grant turned slightly and caught sight of the assistant from before, the one with the green eyes who'd stepped in when everything went sideways. "You, His throat was dry. He coughed. "You finished the cut?" "Yes," the assistant replied without fanfare. "You lost consciousness at the distal head. The interface was 1 millimeter off your intended junction. I corrected the trajectory." "You did it exactly?" Grant asked, blinking. "That's impressive." "I had studied the procedure. Your neural map showed intention. The margin of error was minor." "You read my neural map?" "I inferred it from your motor priming." Grant gave a weak chuckle. "Okay, you're officially terrifying. What's your name?" The assistant hesitated. "Hessel." "Well, Hessel," Grant said, trying to sit up only for his stomach to lurch and a cold sweat to break across his forehead. He lay back down quickly. "I owe you one. If that cut had gone too high, regrowth would have been off the table." Sareth entered the room at that moment, carrying a small translucent pad displaying his vitals. "Your condition is stable, but barely. Your physiology resists our metabolic boosters. Nutrient intake has been inefficient. We estimate 20 standard days until moderate functional recovery." "Sounds about right," Grant muttered. "Rehabilitation will be hell, but at least I'll live." "And your arm?" Sareth asked. "It is now considered a candidate for regrowth. With the right scaffolding and nerve templates, yeah, Earth's got regrowth labs equipped for this. It'll take months, but I've seen full reconnections, with tactile feedback and strength return above 90% baseline." Sareth's expression didn't change, but Hessel looked somewhere between intrigued and awestruck. "We don't have regenerative options," Hessel said quietly. "We reassign duties after amputation. Some citizens live half-lives." Grant nodded. "Well, on Earth, we throw everything we have at rebuilding. Not just because we can, it's because we have to. Half a planet is still underwater. We can't afford to lose people to injuries if we can avoid it." Sareth studied him for a moment, then tapped on the pad. "We have stabilized your immune response. The infection has been eradicated locally. We could not have predicted your anesthetic resistance." "No hard feelings," Grant said. "But if you'd started cutting while I was awake, I might have punched someone, with my one good hand." "I read about your species' fight-or-flight reflex," Sareth replied. "It seemed unwise." "You made the right call," Grant said, and glanced at Hessel again. And you studied banned journals? I did, Hessel admitted. Terran regenerative science is classified as fringe speculation under colonial medical protocol. Why? Too many variables, incompatible ethics. Your species considers self-dissection and regrowth acceptable. Many here consider it madness. Madness kept me alive, Grant said, voice hoarse. Sometimes the crazy ones are just ahead of their time. He dozed for a while after that, floating somewhere between restless dreams and vague awareness. At some point, a soft mechanical arm entered his periphery and refitted the gauze, checking for signs of tissue rejection. Another probe monitored nerve response along the stump. His body felt like it had been welded together with rusted parts and battery acid. Later, he woke again to a smell something warm and savory. Soup? Could aliens make soup? Hessel sat nearby with a steaming bowl. We synthesized nutrient broth to match human digestion, slightly salted, thermal stable. You cooked for me, Grant said. Does this mean we're friends now? It's a medical precaution. I'll take it. He tried to sit up again, this time more slowly. His body protested, but the broth called louder. Hessel helped him, guiding a small, flat spoon to his mouth. Not bad, Grant muttered between sips. Little metallic, but I'm not complaining. I adjusted the iron content. Your species is unusual in its hemoglobin dependency. Don't I know it? We bleed like busted pipes. Hessel looked away, hesitant. You were crying during the procedure. That was unexpected. I was cutting my own arm off while conscious, Grant said. What did you expect? Singing? It is rare to witness your species so vulnerable. Grant gave a crooked smile. Yeah, well, I'm no action hero, just a guy who didn't want to lose a limb forever. That night, he barely slept. Every time he drifted off, his dreams were filled with phantom limb sensations, his missing arm reaching for instruments, hovering just out of grasp. The pain wasn't sharp anymore, but a dull, ever-present buzz at the edge of his awareness. By morning, he'd sweated through the bedding. Sareth returned with updates. Your blood volume has stabilized. We recommend beginning passive limb exercises for circulation. Any way to speed up tissue regrowth here? Grant asked. Number. Our facilities lack the scaffold technology. Replanting a limb is impossible under current protocol. But you're not filing for euthanasia. Not yet, Sareth said. You've proven unusually resourceful. High praise. Over the next several days, Grant became a fixture in the ward. Patients, most of them alien, a few interstellar traders, peered into his room with a kind of morbid fascination. He was the human who'd sawn off his own arm. Some treated him like a hero. Others avoided eye contact. Hessel brought meals, updated his bandages, and occasionally showed him snippets of Terran articles smuggled into the hospital database. I have questions, Hessel said one day, showing him a flickering article on neural regrowth factors. Why do you use viral scaffolds instead of nanostructure? Because viruses adapt better to biological variability, less chance of rejection. But they are alive. So are we, Grant said. Might as well put the little bastards to work. As the days ticked by, Grant's strength returned incrementally. First, he could sit up for longer than 10 minutes. Then he managed to walk across the room unaided. After 2 weeks, he could perform basic upper body rehab with a harness and a pulley system. Still, every morning, he'd wake to the stump where his arm used to be and feel a rush of nausea. The psychological whiplash never got easier. One morning, as Hessel replaced his bandage, Grant broke the silence. You ever think of practicing real surgery? I am not licensed, Hessel replied. You're better than some surgeons I've worked with back home. You knew what I was trying to do before I passed out. You finished the job. I studied, but not officially. So? You want my endorsement when I get back to Earth? Hessel looked uncertain. They would not allow it. I've got pull. I'll make them listen. You are assuming you'll return. Grant's gaze darkened. I'm not staying here, Hessel. No offense. But I need my lab, my protocols, and my arm. Hessel nodded slowly. Understood. As Grant leaned back against the padded wall and stared at the faint outline where his arm used to be, he said quietly, Thanks for not letting me die. Hessel paused. It was an honor. Grant's stump twitched. It wasn't real movement, of course. Just the brain misfiring, convinced his left arm was still attached and trying to scratch an itch that no longer existed. He'd stopped reacting aloud after the 5th time it happened. Now, he just stared at it when it twitched, jaw clenched, pretending his stomach wasn't tying itself into pretzels. 18 days had passed. By Earth standards, he should have been well into the recovery window. Light resistance training, maybe even pre-scan mapping for scaffold compatibility. But out here? On this remote dust ball, he was treading water in a bucket with a hole. Hessel found him outside the med dome, sitting on a stack of repurposed shipping crates and watching a low-oxygen dust storm roll in from the western ridge. Grant had insisted on getting some air. Sareth had called it unnecessary exertion bordering on delusion. Hessel had just handed him a breath mask and walked him to the door. "You're ahead of projections," Hessel said, sitting beside him. "Your red cell count has nearly normalized." Grant tapped his stump. "Great. Still can't hold a spoon in my left hand." "You did perform emergency surgery on yourself. The fact that you can stand unaided is statistically rare." Grant tilted his head toward Hessel. "You mean statistically impossible?" "I didn't say that." "You implied it." He sighed, leaned back against the crate. "If I were home, I'd be halfway to a neural bonding scaffold by now." "You are impatient." "No," Grant said. "I'm a surgeon, and surgeons hate waiting, especially when the solution is out there and you're stuck with outdated gear and sympathetic aliens." Hessel looked thoughtful. "We have other options." Grant narrowed his eyes. "Such as?" Hessel pulled something from his satchel. It was a small, rectangular tablet, scuffed at the edges, clearly old. When activated, it projected a flickering display entirely in Terran English. "Where did you get that?" "There is a trader hub near the cliffs," Hessel said. "They collect interstellar data caches. This one contained a full archive of banned Terran regenerative research." Grant's heartbeat sped up. "You've had this the whole time?" "I didn't want to overwhelm your recovery," Hessel said quietly. "But if you are stable now, we might begin Phase 1. Grant took the tablet. His fingers trembled slightly. The data was fragmented but readable. Neuromuscular regrowth models, scaffold matrices, adaptive gel applications. Stuff EarthGov had published 20 years ago, scrubbed from intergalactic sharing agreements due to ethical inconsistencies. "Why was this banned here again?" Grant muttered. "The Colonial Council feared it would tempt unauthorized experimentation." Grant looked up. "Like what you did to save my life?" Hessel didn't answer. They spent the next 4 days working in secret. Not covertly, Sareth knew, but quietly, with minimal interference. Hessel brought equipment from other buildings under the pretense of structural maintenance. Grant modified the tools one by one, explaining each change as he went. "This is a hydrocatalytic stimulator," he said, holding a bulbous device. "We tweak the pulse width, and we've got a perfect growth enhancer for protein synthesis." Hessel watched closely, antennae twitching. "And this?" "Cellular bridge agent, normally used for infection barriers. But with a little bit of RNA guidance, we can reprogram local tissue to accept synthetic scaffolding." "You do this often?" "Not exactly," Grant admitted. "Earth doesn't encourage this kind of field improvisation, but necessity is the mother of all borderline illegal innovation." By the 5th day, they had a working model. The prototype was crude, a reinforced gel lattice in a nutrient frame, shaped roughly like a human forearm, but it had the right receptors and could act as a placeholder. Once Grant returned home, it could be replaced with a permanent graft. All they needed was integration. "This is going to hurt," Hessel said, as he calibrated the nerve interface. "I've done worse," Grant replied. "Just go slow." The procedure took 2 hours. The gel frame was attached to the stump using microfibers pulled from salvaged medical thread. Bioreactive glue followed, then a controlled pulse of electromagnetic fields to stimulate peripheral nerve activity. Grant screamed once, then bit down on a towel and refused to make another sound. When it was over, he passed out again. This time, though, it was different. No collapse, just a slow, medically induced sleep, aided by a custom mix of Terran-safe sedatives they'd concocted using a medkit and an overripe fruit from a local tree that happened to share chemical cousins with low-grade tranquilizers. He woke the next morning with a dull ache where his stump had been, and a strange pressure where his arm used to be. Hessel was already there, scanning. "Connection is holding," Hessel said. "No rejection detected. You may experience irregular phantom feedback for several cycles." Grant lifted the arm slowly. The gel frame shimmered faintly under the synthetic skin wrap. It wasn't functional, not yet. But it looked like a real arm. He smiled. "Never thought I'd say this," he whispered, "but you might have just saved my career." Sareth entered moments later, flanked by a tall figure in dark armor, some sort of administrator or enforcement official. "Grant Mercer," the armored alien said, voice metallic and cold. "You have engaged in unauthorized modification of a biological state under Colonial Ordinance 12. This is a violation." Grant sat up slowly. "I didn't exactly have options. You were advised against self-operation. Your actions placed yourself and our personnel at risk." "He would have died otherwise," Hessel said, stepping forward. "I'm not blaming your people," Grant said, turning to the enforcer. "But you weren't prepared for a human body. I was. There are channels, requests, permissions. I was bleeding out." The enforcer paused. "You will be allowed to leave when your transport arrives, but you will not take any alien equipment with you." "That's fine," Grant said, patting the gel arm. "This isn't alien. It's human improvisation with borrowed tools. You may be prohibited from re-entry. I wasn't planning a vacation here." With that, the enforcer left. Sareth lingered. "Your prototype. Will you permit study?" Grant looked at Hessel. Hessel nodded. "Send me a copy," Grant said. "Let's compare notes. Who knows? Maybe Earth and Joyle Medical Council finally write a joint paper." Sareth looked amused. "Unlikely, but not impossible." That night, Grant sat in his hospital room, flexing the gel limb slightly. Movement was minimal. He had maybe 5 degrees of wrist rotation and could make a soft claw, but it was enough to hold a stylus. He scribbled a note on his tablet. "To EarthGov, recommend review of interstellar emergency protocol regarding alien medical environments. Also, maybe loosen the restrictions on Terran field regeneration manuals. You never know when you'll need to saw your own arm off." The shuttle hissed as its ramp extended onto the rock-strewn platform outside the clinic. A pair of Terran medevac personnel stepped out first, both wearing the polished gray of EarthGov Recovery Corps, each carrying a clean, oversized trauma case that could double as a surgical cradle if things went downhill mid-flight. Grant watched them approach from inside, sitting up in the wheeled recovery chair Hessel had rigged with foam stabilizers. He looked better, thinner, paler, and still moving like he'd been stitched together by a student with trembling hands but alive. The makeshift arm, gel-based and imperfect, was strapped securely to his side. The taller medic checked a tablet. "Dr. Grant Mercer?" "That's me," Grant said. "Technically lieutenant, but I like it when people lead with the doctorate. We'll be securing you for transport. Minimal atmospheric pressure changes during ascent. 36 hours to EarthMed Lunar Bay." Grant nodded, then turned to Hessel, who stood just behind him, arms folded and face unreadable. "Not bad for an unlicensed surgical assistant," Grant said. "I was merely applying field knowledge. You did more than that. Without you, I'd be dead, short an arm, or a hazard for a medical ethics tribunal. Maybe all three. You would have done the same." "Probably," Grant said, "and I'd have written myself up for it later." Sareth entered the room, standing behind Hessel, with that same calm aura it had maintained throughout the ordeal. "The medevac team has filed your clearance. You may depart. We have logged your condition as stabilized pending advanced intervention on your homeworld." "Any news on the arm?" Grant asked. "Your severed limb was preserved in stasis. Our refrigeration protocols were crude, but the sample remains viable. With current Earth technology, it is possible reattachment could be attempted." Grant felt a strange twist in his gut, something between hope and anxiety. "You kept the arm?" "Yes," Hessel insisted. Hessel looked at the floor. "It seemed important." Grant nodded slowly. "It was." The medic gestured. "We'll need to prep you for boarding. Can you walk, or do we assist?" "I can manage." Grant stood, carefully. With one hand on the chair for balance, he tested his legs. His right leg still felt like it carried an extra 30 pounds, and the gel arm weighed almost nothing, which threw off his gait. but he moved haltingly toward the ramp. Halfway there, he stopped and turned back. "You know," he said, glancing at both Sareth and Hessel, "I'm not good at thank yous. Never was. Usually figure a high five and a stiff drink do the trick. But this was more than a save." Hessel's green eyes were steady. "It was necessary." "No, it wasn't," Grant said. "You risked your standing, your career, maybe more. You trusted my judgment when I barely had blood pressure. And you saved my arm in a way my own people might not have thought to try." He stepped forward and raised his right hand. Hessel hesitated, then mirrored the gesture. Their palms touched awkwardly. Hessel's skin cool and slightly textured, like silicone overlay on polished stone. "That's a Terran thing," Grant explained. "It means respect, usually between equals." Hessel blinked once. "Then I will learn it." The medic cleared his throat politely. "Dr. Mercer." Yeah, I'm coming." Grant turned back one last time at the top of the ramp. "Oh, Hessel, if you ever want formal training, or if someone upstairs tries to penalize you, tell them to call EarthGov Trauma Certification Board. Use my code. Tell them I said you're already halfway to level 4. "I do not require credentials," Hessel said. "Maybe not. But I want to be on your team if I ever crash again." The doors hissed shut behind him, and the shuttle lifted slowly into the thin sky, cutting through purple haze and disappearing into the stratosphere like a ghost, leaving the scene of an improbable miracle. Back on Earth, the Lunar Bay Med facility gleamed under synthetic sunlight and artificial gravity, with clean white floors and soft music, designed by psychologists to ease patients out of trauma-induced disorientation. Grant arrived with 3 injuries noted in his file: amputation, severe tissue loss, and self-inflicted surgery without anesthesia. The doctors didn't believe the last one until the footage was extracted from the alien facility's logs. Then, they gave him a private room, a priority regrowth schedule, and a psych consult on day 2. His own arm, his real arm, was placed in a biostasis chamber. It had degraded somewhat, but the stem markers were intact. Within a week, the team initiated neurovascular scaffolding, using the gel prototype from Hessel's design as a template. Grant watched from the observation room as the medtechs slowly guided the process, layering muscle, coaxing nerve endings to unfurl like vines toward their original housing. His body, for all its trauma, recognized itself. It took 6 months. 6 long, painful, physically taxing months, filled with neural retraining, thermal therapy, strength rebuild, and endless tests of dexterity. His arm came back online in pieces, a finger twitch here, a clenched fist there, tremors fading only after the 3rd round of nerve calibration. But one morning he picked up a coffee mug with his left hand, and didn't drop it. He cried for 5 minutes, and blamed it on bad espresso. The regrowth team asked him if he wanted the arm cosmetically restored, skin tone matched, scar removal performed. He declined. "I want to remember," he said. "Besides, gives me character." On his final day at Lunar Bay, he filed a personal letter directed through the diplomatic interstellar network, flagged under non-essential civilian communication. It went out as compressed binary and arrived weeks later, but it reached its destination. Hessel sat at a quiet bench beside a glowing crystal fountain on the far side of the colony, a small portable pad in hand. The message had no subject, just one line in Terran English. "Arms back. Still ugly, still mine. Wouldn't have made it without you. You're the best assistant I never officially had. Stay weird, G." Hessel folded the pad slowly and looked toward the fading sun, the twin moons rising beyond the ridge. For the first time in weeks, a small smile, noted only by the slight crinkle at the edges of his jawline, formed as he resumed reading the smuggled Terran medical journals. There was still so much to learn. And maybe, just maybe, the galaxy was ready to learn with him.